The emergency lights in the Galactic Council chamber had been flashing red for 3 days now. Nobody remembered to turn them off anymore. The crisis had become normal, and normal was terrifying. Counselor Threnvac stood at the center of the great circular room, his 7 limbs trembling slightly as he prepared to deliver his report. He was a Merivian, a species known throughout the galaxy for their brilliant minds and calm nature. Today, he felt neither brilliant nor calm. He felt like a failure. Around him sat representatives from 42 different species. They filled seats that floated at different heights, adjusted for bodies of every shape and size. Some breathed oxygen. Others breathed methane or ammonia through special masks. All of them shared the same expression of worry in whatever way their faces could show it. Fellow council members, Threnvac began, his voice carrying through the translation devices that turned his clicks and whistles into words everyone could understand. I must report that we have made no progress. A wave of disappointed sounds moved through the chamber. Sighs, groans, clicking mandibles, and rustling feathers all mixed together into a symphony of frustration. The problem had started 3 cycles ago on a small colony world called Vethfor, the Kralik serpents. Massive creatures that hunted in the planet's endless swamps had vanished. At first, the colonists celebrated. The serpents were dangerous, responsible for dozens of deaths each year. But within weeks, the celebration turned to horror. Without the Kraliks to hunt them, the swamp rodents multiplied beyond control. They ate the roots of the water trees. The water trees died. The fish that lived among the roots died next. Then the birds that ate the fish. Then the insects that the birds had kept in check. Within 2 months, the entire ecosystem of Vethfor was collapsing like a tower of blocks with its foundation removed. And Vethfor was just the beginning. Threnvac pressed a button, and a holographic map appeared above his head. 17 worlds glowed with angry red markers. The Kashan moons had lost their thundermaws, giant flying predators that kept the herbivore populations balanced. Moras Prime had lost its siltrates, terrifying creatures that lived in the mud and prevented the bottom feeders from destroying the riverbanks. Callistation had lost its void sharks, which everyone had thought was good news until the space algae they fed on clogged every external sensor on the station. We have deployed every resource available, Threnvac continued. Our orbital scanners have searched millions of square kilometers. Our genetic tracers have found no remains, no evidence of death. Our predictive AI models have run 17 billion simulations. He paused, all 4 of his eyes blinking in sequence. We have found nothing. No disease. No migration trail. No evidence of poaching. The apex predators of 17 worlds have simply vanished. In the back of the chamber, in a seat so small it was almost hidden behind a support pillar, Ambassador Chunwheelin of Earth sat quietly. She was a thin woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, and she had been with the Galactic Union for only 2 years. Humanity was still considered a young species, barely worthy of their seat on the council. Most of the other representatives forgot. She was there. Wei-Lin listened carefully as Threnvac described the research efforts. 40,000 hours of expert analysis. 300 xenobiologists from 12 different species. The finest scientific minds the galaxy could offer, all working together, all coming up empty. She thought about her niece, who was currently on the station visiting during her school break. May was 12 years old and bored out of her mind. She had already explored every public area of the station twice and had started making friends with the maintenance. Robots just for something to do. Wei-Lin also thought about something else. Something from Earth, a memory from her own childhood. Sitting in a classroom learning about passenger, pigeons and dodo birds, and all the creatures that humans had destroyed before they learned better. When Threnvac finished his report with a heavy sigh, The chamber fell silent. The weight of 17 dying worlds pressed down on everyone present. "We are open to suggestions," said Grand Arbiter Yenix, a crystalline being who spoke in chiming tones. "Any suggestions? From any member?" Wei Lin raised her hand. Several nearby representatives turned to look at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to dismissal. The human? What could the human possibly offer? Ambassador Chun, Grand Arbiter Yenix acknowledged. "You wish to speak?" Wei Lin stood up slowly. "I may have someone who can help," she said. "My niece is visiting the station." "She is good at puzzles." For a moment, nobody reacted. Then the laughter started. It began with a chittering sound from the insectoid, delegate of Sector 7. Then a deep rumbling chuckle from the massive Bronteran representative. Soon, the entire chamber was filled with the sounds of dozens of species expressing amusement in dozens of different ways. "Your niece?" Threnvac asked, not unkindly. His species did not laugh, but Wei Lin could see the confusion in his 4 eyes. "Ambassador, with respect, we have assembled the greatest scientific minds in the Union. What can a human child possibly contribute?" Wei Lin did not sit down. She had lived long enough to know when she was being underestimated. And she had represented humanity long enough to know that being underestimated was sometimes an advantage. "Councillor Threnvac," she said calmly, "how many species has the Merivian civilization driven to extinction?" The question was so unexpected that Threnvac's limbs froze in confusion. "None," he said after a moment. "We developed our technology in harmony with our ecosystem. We have never caused an extinction event. And the Bronterans? The Yenix Collective? The people of Sector 7? Around the chamber, representatives shook their heads or made negative gestures. None of them, not one species in the Galactic Union, had ever been responsible for the extinction of another creature on their homeworld. Wei Lin nodded slowly. "Humans have," she said. "Many times. We have destroyed hundreds of species through ignorance, greed, and carelessness. We have watched ecosystems collapse because we did not understand what we were doing until it was too late." The laughter had stopped. Everyone was listening now. "My people have learned hard lessons," Wei Lin continued. "We have learned to see patterns in dying worlds because we have caused those patterns ourselves. We teach our children these lessons before they can walk. My niece may be young, but she has been studying ecological collapse since she was 5 years old." She looked directly at Threnvac. "Sometimes, Counselor, the expert is not the one with the most knowledge. Sometimes the expert is the one who has made the most mistakes and learned from them." The chamber was silent. Grand Arbiter Yenix's crystalline form flickered with internal light as they considered the human's words. "Bring the child," the Grand Arbiter said finally. "We have nothing left to lose." Wei Lin bowed her head slightly. Then she walked out of the chamber to find her niece, leaving behind a room full of brilliant alien minds who were about to learn a very human lesson about the value of failure. Mei Chun was lying upside down on her bed, watching a video about deep-sea creatures on her tablet, when her aunt knocked on the door. The tablet was covered in cartoon stickers, mostly animals with big eyes and silly expressions. A gift from her father before she left Earth. "May," Ambassador Chun said, stepping into the small guest quarters. "I need your help with something." May paused her video and rolled over, her black hair falling messily across her face. "What kind of something? Is it boring?" "Everything here is boring. I already counted all the ceiling tiles in the cafeteria. There are 4,017. "It is not boring," her aunt said with a small smile. "It is a puzzle. A very important puzzle that some very smart aliens cannot solve." May sat up straight. Her aunt never joked about important things. "What kind of puzzle?" 20 minutes later, May walked into a conference room filled with alien scientists and understood for the first time that her aunt had not been exaggerating. Holographic displays covered every wall. Data strings flickered in colors she did not have names for. And at the center of it all stood Counselor Threnvac, a creature with 7 limbs and 4 eyes, who looked at her like she was an insect that had crawled into his laboratory. "This is the child?" Threnvac asked, not bothering to hide his doubt. "This is May Chun," Ambassador Chun replied. "She is 12 years old, and she wants to help." May did not feel intimidated. She had faced worse things than skeptical aliens. She had once given a presentation about climate change to her entire school while her zipper was down. Nothing could be more embarrassing than that. "Can you show me what's happening?" she asked. "Like, from the beginning?" Threnvac exchanged a glance with his colleagues. A Bronteran scientist the size of a small car shrugged its massive shoulders. What did they have to lose? The Merivian pressed a series of buttons, and the room filled with holographic images. Maps of 17 worlds appeared, each one marked with red zones where apex predators had vanished. Population charts showed the collapse happening in real time, the numbers dropping like stones in water. Timeline analyzers showed the dates when each species disappeared. May pulled out her tablet and started taking notes. The scientists watched her with a mixture of curiosity and pity. The poor human child, they thought. She does not even understand what she is looking at. But May was not confused. She was thinking. The information was different from anything she had seen in school, but the patterns felt familiar. Like a word problem in math class, just with bigger numbers and stranger names. "Can I see where they lived?" she asked. "Like the actual spots on the maps." Threnvac adjusted the display. Topographical maps replaced the population charts, showing mountains and valleys and oceans and swamps in perfect detail. The predator habitats were marked in bright yellow. May studied them carefully. She tilted her head to one side, then the other. She zoomed in on certain areas and zoomed out on others. She asked for a stylus and started circling locations on her tablet screen. "What did they eat?" she asked. "Excuse me?" said a small furry scientist whose species May did not recognize. "The Kralik serpents. The ones that disappeared from the swamps." "What did they eat?" The furry scientist blinked several times. They were carnivores. They hunted the swamp rodents primarily, though they would also consume larger prey when available. And they hunted at night, right?" "Correct." "They are nocturnal predators." May nodded and made more notes. She moved to the next display, showing the thunder moths of the Cashan moons. "These ones are different," she said. "They don't hunt at night. They hunt at dawn and dusk, crepuscular." Threnvac's 4 eyes widened slightly. He had not expected a human child to know that word. "That is accurate," he admitted. "Where did they sleep?" "In cliffside caves, primarily on the eastern faces of the mountain ranges." May circled something on her tablet. Then she pulled up a document that her aunt had given her to read on the shuttle ride to the station. It was a boring report about the Galactic Union's expansion initiative, full of numbers and dates and construction schedules. "When did you guys put in the new navigation beacons?" she asked. The question seemed to come from nowhere. The scientists looked at each other in confusion. What did navigation beacons have to do with missing predators? "The beacon network was upgraded approximately 4 cycles ago," Threnvac answered slowly. "But I failed to see the relevance." May did not respond. She was cross-referencing the beacon installation dates with the predator disappearance dates, her eyes moving quickly between 2 screens. The scientists watched her work, still not understanding what she was looking for. Ambassador Chen stood quietly in the corner, saying nothing. She had seen this before, not from May specifically, but from human children in general. The way they looked at problems differently. The way they asked questions that adults had forgotten to ask. The beacon's pulse, right? May said suddenly. Like, they sent out a signal every few seconds. Every 11.8 seconds, Threnvac confirmed. For optimal signal clarity, what kind of signal? I mean, what does it look like? Is it a light? A sound? Both? The Merivian scientist pulled up another display. It showed the beacon design in detail, including the electromagnetic spectrum of its signal pulse. May studied it with the same intensity she had used for the population charts. Okay, she said slowly. One more question. Do any of these species use bioluminescence? Like, do they glow to communicate? The room went very quiet. Threnvac felt something strange happening in his mind. It was like watching a puzzle piece float through the air, not yet connected to anything, but somehow knowing exactly where it was going to land. The Krallic serpents use bioluminescent patterns for mating displays, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The frequency of their glow is approximately. He stopped. His limbs went rigid. All four of his eyes locked onto the beacon specifications on the screen. 12 seconds, he finished up. Mei-Chen smiled. It was the smile of a student who had just figured out the answer to a test question that everyone else thought was impossible. Can I use the big display? She asked. I think I need to show you guys something. The scientist parted like water around a stone, making room for the 12-year-old human girl who was about to solve their unsolvable mystery. Ambassador Chen allowed herself a small moment of pride as her niece walked to the center of the room, tablet in hand, ready to give the most important presentation of her life. She had taught May many things over the years. How to be polite, how to be patient, how to respect other cultures. But she had never needed to teach her how to see patterns in nature. That was something every human child learned without even trying. Mei-Chen stood in front of the largest holographic display she had ever seen. It stretched from floor to ceiling and curved around her like a movie screen at a fancy theater. 17 worlds floated in the air before her, each one slowly rotating to show its mountains and oceans and forests. The alien scientists had given her full control of the display. She could tell they still did not believe she would find anything useful, but they were desperate enough to let her try. Desperation, May had learned, made people open to strange ideas. Okay, she said, tapping her tablet to connect it to the main system. I need everyone to look at this without thinking like scientists. Threnvac made a confused sound. I do not understand. We are scientists. How else would we think? Just pretend you're animals, May said. Pretend you're one of these predators, living in your territory, doing your thing. Hunting, sleeping, making babies. Whatever predators do. A few of the scientists exchanged uncomfortable glances. This was not how research was supposed to work. But nobody stopped her. May pulled up her marked maps and projected them onto the holographic display. The 17 worlds now showed two sets of dots. Red dots marked where the predators used to live. Blue dots marked something else. The red dots are the predator habitats, May explained. The blue dots are new infrastructure from the expansion initiative. Mostly navigation beacons, but also some relay stations and communication towers. She pressed another button. Thin lines appeared, connecting the blue dots to specific dates. Then more lines appeared, connecting those dates to when the predators disappeared. From nearby red zones, the pattern was so clear that even May was surprised she had not seen it immediately. Every single predator disappearance happened within 2 weeks of a new beacon being installed nearby, she said. Every single one. The room was silent. The scientists stared at the display, their brilliant minds finally seeing what they had missed. It was so simple, so obvious. They had been looking for complex explanations when the answer was right in front of them. "But that makes no sense," said the furry scientist from before. "The beacons are harmless. They emit no radiation that could hurt these creatures. We tested extensively for environmental contamination. They didn't get hurt," May said. "They left." She zoomed in on the beacon specifications again, highlighting the pulse frequency. "Your beacons flash every 11.8 seconds. Do you know what else flashes at about 12 seconds? She did not wait for an answer. She pulled up a file on Krallick's serpent behavior and projected a video. It showed two massive serpents in a swamp, their bodies glowing with patterns of light. The lights pulsed slowly, rhythmically, about 12 seconds between each flash. "Mating displays," May said. "The Krallicks use bioluminescence to attract mates. When a male serpent is looking for a female, he glows like this. And when a female is not interested, she glows faster to tell him to go away." She switched to another video, this one showing thundermoths circling each other in the sky. Their wings had glowing edges that pulsed with light. Thundermoths do the same thing, but they also use light patterns to mark territory. A slow pulse means, "This is my hunting ground." A fast pulse means, "Danger. Predator nearby. Everyone hide." May pulled up more examples. Species after species, world after world. Each one used some form of light or electromagnetic signal to communicate. Mating calls, warning signals, territorial markers. The languages were different, but the frequencies were remarkably similar. "Your beacons are screaming," May said, turning to face the scientists. "Not to you. To them. Your beacons are screaming in animal languages, saying a dozen different things at once. Danger, mating season. Territory claimed. Predator approaching. Get out, get out, get out." Threnvac's 7 limbs had gone completely still. He stared at the display with all 4 eyes, running calculations in his head. The math worked. The timeline worked. Everything worked. "The apex predators did not die," he said slowly. "They fled. They abandoned territories they had held for generations because we filled their homes with signals they could not ignore." "Exactly," May said. "Imagine if someone put a giant loudspeaker next to your house that played alarm sirens 24 hours a day. You would leave too, right? Even if the sirens were not actually warning about anything real, you could not live with that noise." The Bronteran scientist raised one massive hand. "But where did they go?" "We searched everywhere." May pulled up a new map, this one showing the areas where no beacons had been installed. Remote regions. Empty zones that the expansion initiative had not yet reached. "I bet if you search here," she said, drawing circles around the blank spaces, "you will find them." They went somewhere quieter, somewhere the signals could not reach. She paused, thinking about something else. "They're probably really stressed out, though, and overcrowded. If all the predators from the regular territories moved into the empty zones, there would be too many of them in too small an area. They might be fighting each other for food and space." The scientists were already moving. Hands and limbs and tentacles reached for communication devices. Orders were given in a dozen different languages. Search teams redirected. Scanning equipment RECALIBRATE. May watched the chaos with a mixture of pride and relief. She had been right. The puzzle was solved. Ambassador Chen walked over and put a hand on her niece's shoulder. "Well done," she said quietly. "How did you figure it out?" May shrugged. "We studied something like this in school last year. Remember the story about the sea turtles?" Her aunt smiled. She did remember. It was a famous case from Earth's history, when humans had built beach resorts with bright lights that confused newly hatched sea turtles. The baby turtles were supposed to follow the moonlight to the ocean, but the resort lights made them crawl in the wrong direction. Thousands of them died before anyone understood what was happening. The aliens never had that problem, May continued. They never made that mistake. So they never learned to look for it. Threnvac approached them, his movement hesitant in a way that May had not seen before. He seemed smaller somehow, less confident. "The child is correct," he said to Ambassador Chun. "We have confirmed her hypothesis. Preliminary scans of the beacon-free zones show large concentrations of the missing predators. Exactly where she predicted. What happens now?" May asked. "We change the beacon frequencies," Threnvac said. "We make them stop pulsing, or we change the rhythm so it no longer matches natural communication patterns. It will take time, but the predators should return to their original territories within a few months." He paused, his four eyes focusing on May with an expression she could not quite read. "You have saved 17 worlds today, Mei-chun. Billions of lives, countless species, entire ecosystems. All because you asked questions that we never thought to ask." May felt her face getting warm. She had never been good at receiving compliments. "It's really not that impressive," she said. "We do this stuff in school all the time. It's like homework." Threnvac made a sound that might have been a laugh if his species knew how to laugh. "Then your species does very interesting homework," he said. Behind them, the holographic display showed the 17 worlds slowly returning to their normal colors. The red warning zones were already fading, replaced by the blue of Hope. May looked at the map and thought about all the creatures out there, confused and scared, waiting in crowded spaces for a danger that was never real. Soon they would be able to go home. She understood how they felt. She had been homesick for Earth since she arrived at the station. But now, for the first time, she was glad she had come. 3 days after Mei-chun solved the mystery of the vanishing predators, Counselor Threnvac could not sleep. This was unusual for a Moravian. His species was famous for their ability to rest efficiently, entering a state of perfect calm whenever their bodies required recovery. But Threnvac's mind would not stop working. He kept replaying the events in his head. The emergency meetings, the failed research, the months of wasted effort, and then a human child walking into the room and solving everything in less than an hour. It was not jealousy that kept him awake. Moravians did not experience jealousy in the way that other species did. It was something deeper and more troubling. It was the realization that he had never truly understood humans at all. He found Ambassador Chun in the observation deck, staring out at the stars through the massive transparent wall. She held a cup of something warm in her hands, steam rising in gentle curves. "Ambassador," Threnvac said, approaching carefully. "May I speak with you?" Chun turned and smiled. "Of course, Counselor. Please, join me." They stood together in silence for a moment, watching a distant nebula glow with colors that had no names in any language. The universe was beautiful and vast and full of mysteries. Threnvac had devoted his life to solving those mysteries. Now he felt like he had missed the most important one of all. "I need to understand," he said finally. "Your niece did in 1 hour what my team could not do in 3 cycles. She is 12 years old. She has no advanced education, no research experience, no specialized equipment. How is this possible?" Ambassador Chun took a sip from her cup. "What do you think the answer is?" Threnvac had been considering this question for 3 days. She must have some form of enhanced cognition. Perhaps humans develop faster than we realized. Or perhaps she is exceptionally gifted, a prodigy among her kind. May is smart, Chun admitted. But she is not a prodigy. Her grades are average. Her teachers say she daydreams too much in class. On Earth, she would be considered a perfectly normal child. This made even less sense. Threnvac's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep confusion. Then how did she see what we could not see? Chun set down her cup on the railing and turned to face him fully. Her expression was calm but serious. Counselor, how many species have the Merivians driven to extinction in your history? The question was the same one she had asked in the council chamber, but now it felt different. More personal. More important. None, Threnvik answered. Our civilization developed in balance with our ecosystem. We learned to use technology that complemented natural systems rather than destroying them. We are proud of this achievement. You should be, Chun said. It is remarkable. In the entire Galactic Union, no species has ever caused an extinction event on their homeworld. You developed faster than light travel while maintaining perfect ecological harmony. That is something humans could never do. She paused, looking back at the stars. Do you know how many species humans have driven to extinction? Threnvik had researched this after the council meeting. The number had shocked him. Your records indicate several hundred confirmed extinctions, with estimates of thousands more that occurred before proper documentation. The passenger pigeon? Chun said softly. The dodo bird. The western black rhinoceros. The golden toad. The Tasmanian tiger. The Beiji dolphin. She spoke the names like a prayer, each one weighted with grief. We killed them all, sometimes through hunting, sometimes through habitat destruction, sometimes through sheer ignorance, not understanding that our actions would have consequences until it was too late. Threnvik did not know how to respond. In Merivian culture, causing the death of an entire species would be the greatest crime imaginable. The idea that humans had done this hundreds of times was difficult to process. We are not proud of this history, Chun continued, but we have learned from it. Every human child grows up learning about the creatures we destroyed. We teach them to see the patterns of ecological collapse because we have caused those patterns ourselves. We train them to think like prey and predator and ecosystem because we have seen what happens when we do not. She turned back to Threnvik, and her eyes were shining with something that might have been tears. May did not solve your mystery because she is smarter than your scientists. She solved it because she's been studying extinction since she was 5 years old. Human children learn to look for exactly the kind of pattern your predators showed because on Earth, that pattern has killed so many species that we made it part of our basic education. Threnvik stood very still, processing this information. It was uncomfortable in ways he had not expected. The Galactic Union had always viewed humanity as a young and somewhat primitive species, lucky to have been invited to join the great community of civilized worlds. But now he was beginning to see them differently. You are saying, he said slowly, that your expertise comes from your failures. Yes, Chun said simply. We are good at recognizing dying ecosystems because we have killed so many of them. We understand how animals respond to environmental stress because we have caused that stress countless times. Our knowledge is written in guilt and shame and the graves of creatures that will never exist again. She picked up her cup again, wrapping her hands around its warmth. The species of the Galactic Union developed in harmony with your worlds. You never needed to learn the lessons that Earth taught us. You never made the mistakes that forced us to become experts in ecological collapse. Threnvik thought about his own homeworld, Merivia Prime, the forest that had stood unchanged for millions of years. The oceans that teemed with the same life forms that had existed since before his species achieved sentience. It was beautiful and perfect, and he had always been proud of it. But now he understood something he had never considered before. His people had never learned to fix a broken ecosystem because they had never broken one. They had never developed tools for preventing extinction because they had never caused one. Their perfect harmony had left them blind to the patterns of destruction. Your species frightens me, he admitted. Not because you are dangerous, but because you have survived things that would have destroyed us." Ambassador Chun smiled sadly. "We frighten ourselves sometimes," she said. "That is how we learn to be better." They stood together in silence, watching the stars wheel slowly past the observation window. Somewhere out there, on 17 different worlds, apex predators were beginning their long journey home. "I would like to apologize," Frenvak said, "to you and to your niece. We dismissed humanity too quickly. We assumed that because you were young to the stars, you had nothing to teach us." "You do not need to apologize," Chun replied. "We are used to being underestimated. Sometimes it is an advantage." Frenvak made a sound that was almost like a laugh. "I suspect it often is," he said. He thought about Mei Chun, the 12-year-old girl who had saved 17 worlds by doing homework. She was sleeping now, probably dreaming about animals and ecosystems and all the things that human children learned without even realizing how remarkable their knowledge was. He thought about what this meant for the future. If one human child could see what his entire team had missed, what else might humanity teach the galaxy? "Ambassador," he said, "I would like to make a proposal to the Council. I think it is time that we started learning from your species properly." Chun raised an eyebrow. "What did you have in mind?" Thrembak looked out at the stars and smiled with 4 eyes. "I think," he said, "that we should start by talking to your children." 6 months had passed since May. Chun stood in front of the holographic display and changed the way the Galactic Union understood humanity. The predators were returning to their territories, exactly as she had predicted. The ecosystems were healing, slowly but steadily. The emergency lights in the council chamber had finally been turned off, but something else had changed too. Something bigger. May stood in a classroom that looked nothing like any classroom she had ever seen. The walls shifted colors to match whatever lesson was being taught. The desks floated at different heights to accommodate students of different species. And those students were the strangest group May had ever been part of. There were 6 young Merivians who had trouble sitting still because they were used to having 7 different surfaces to rest their limbs on. 3 Bronneran calves who were already bigger than May's family car, but spoke in voices as soft as whispers. A dozen other species that May was still learning to identify, each one watching her with expressions of eager curiosity. And there were human children, too. 12 of them, recruited from schools all over Earth, selected not for their grades, but for their ability to see patterns that others missed. Kids who spent their free time watching nature documentaries. Kids who asked questions that made adults uncomfortable. Kids who had been told their whole lives that they thought about things the wrong way. Now those kids were teachers. May adjusted her tablet and smiled at the class. "Today we're going to talk about what happens when you remove the top predator from an ecosystem," she said, "and how to spot the warning signs before it's too late." The students leaned forward in their floating desks, ready to learn. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out on dozens of stations and colony worlds. The Galactic Union had created an entirely new program, human ecological consultants. Not scientists, not researchers, just children who had grown up learning the hard lessons that Earth had taught. The official name for the program was the Interspecies Ecological Education Initiative. The unofficial name, whispered in corridors and laughed about in break rooms, was homework. Threnvak watched one of these classes through a video feed in his office. He had become the primary liaison between the Union and the human consultants, a job that surprised him more each day. The Merivian had spent his entire career studying ecosystems through data and models and careful, scientific analysis. Now he was learning that sometimes the best analysis came from a 14-year-old human girl asking, "But what does the animal actually feel about this?" It was a question that had never occurred to him. Animals did not have feelings in the way that sentient species did. At least, That was what he had always believed. But the humans thought differently. They looked at creatures as individuals with wants and fears and preferences. They asked questions about comfort and stress and happiness. And somehow, those questions led to answers that pure science had missed. A chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. He pressed a button, and Ambassador Chun entered his office. "The council approved the expansion," she said, taking a seat across from his desk. 20 more human children will arrive next month. We're building new training facilities on 3 more stations. Good, Threnvak said. We have requests from 47 worlds. The wait list grows longer every day. Chun smiled, but there was something tired in her expression. We never expected this, she admitted. When I brought May to that meeting, I thought the council would laugh and send us away. I never imagined we would end up here. Your species has a talent for unexpected outcomes, Threnvak observed. I am beginning to think this is not accidental. The ambassador considered this for a moment. We survived because we adapted, she said finally. We made terrible mistakes, but we learned from them. We had no choice. If we did not learn, we would have destroyed ourselves. She gestured at the video feed still playing on Threnvak's display, showing May leading her class through a discussion about predator-prey relationships. Those children are not special, Chun continued. Not in the way you think. They are ordinary human kids who grew up hearing stories about the dodo bird and the passenger pigeon. They learned to feel sad when animals died, even animals they had never seen. They learned to wonder why and what if, and how can we stop this from happening again. Threnvak watched the children in the video discussing whether a particular species of grass eater might feel lonely if separated from its herd. It was not a scientific question. There was no way to measure loneliness in a non-sentient creature. But the humans talked about it anyway, using their imaginations to build bridges between their minds and the minds of creatures they would never truly understand. It is strange, he said. My people spent thousands of years perfecting our scientific methods. We believed that objective analysis was the highest form of understanding. But your children see things we cannot, simply by asking how an animal might feel. Empathy is a survival trait, Chun said. On Earth, the species that understood other species survived longer. We learned to think like our prey so we could hunt them. We learned to think like our predators so we could avoid them. After millions of years, that skill became part of who we are. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the busy station beyond. The irony is not lost on me, she said. We nearly destroyed our planet with that same intelligence. We used our understanding of nature to exploit it faster than any species in Earth's history. We came so close to being the architects of our own extinction. But you survived, Threnvak said. Barely. Chun turned back to face him. And only because we forced ourselves to change. We made laws to protect endangered species. We created preserves and sanctuaries. We taught our children to value other life forms, not just as resources, but as neighbors sharing our world. The video feed showed May finishing her lesson. The alien students were asking questions now, their young minds struggling to grasp concepts that human children learned before they could read. Why would a predator feel territorial? How could a prey animal experience fear without being sentient? What did it mean to think like an ecosystem? May answered each question patiently, drawing diagrams on her tablet and telling stories about Earth animals that the alien children had never heard of. Wolves and deer, lions and zebras, sharks and seals. The eternal dance of hunter and hunted that had shaped life on Earth for billions of years. She is good at this, Threnvak observed. She loves it, Chun replied. All of them do. For the first time in their lives, their strange way of thinking is not a weakness. It is a gift. Threnvak nodded slowly. He thought about his own childhood on Marivia Prime, surrounded by an ecosystem that had never needed saving. He had grown up in a world where nature was stable and predictable, where animals behaved according to patterns that had been studied for millennia. But human children had grown up differently. They had grown up in a world where nature was fragile and wounded, where species disappeared every year, where the patterns kept changing because the world kept breaking. They had learned to see chaos and find order in it. They had learned to love creatures that might not exist by the time they grew old. It was a terrible education in many ways, but it had produced something remarkable. "I visited Earth last month," Threnvok said suddenly. "I wanted to understand where these children come from." Chun looked surprised. "You did? What did you think?" The Merivian was quiet for a long moment, remembering. He had walked through a nature preserve in a place called California, watching human children chase butterflies and catch frogs in their hands. He had seen them lying on their backs in the grass, pointing at clouds and making up stories about the shapes they saw. "I watched a boy, maybe 8 years old, find a snake under a rock," Threnvok said. His friend insisted that snakes did not live under rocks. But the boy knew better. He had been watching the ground for signs of movement, tracking the snake without even realizing he was doing it. It was instinct. Pure, unconscious pattern recognition. He looked at Ambassador Chun with all 4 of his eyes. "Your species frightens me," he said, echoing words he had spoken months ago. "Not because you are dangerous, though you are. Not because you are unpredictable, though you are that too. You frighten me because every one of your children is a potential expert in understanding life. Every one of them could walk into a dying ecosystem and see things that our greatest scientists cannot." Chum smiled, and this time there was no tiredness in it. Only pride. "Good," she said. "We frighten ourselves sometimes. That's how we learn." On the video screen, Mei Chen dismissed her class and began packing up her tablet. She looked happy. She looked like she belonged. And somewhere out there, across 17 worlds and counting, apex predators were returning home, guided back by the wisdom of children who had learned from humanity's long and bloody history with its own planet. How to think like the wild. The lesson was over. The homework was done, but for humanity and the Galactic Union alike, the learning had only just begun.